Conflict is what makes a story move, but without a central antagonist, that conflict has no gravity. It floats, and eventually, so does the audience's attention. Now, I already know what some people are thinking, but what if my story has multiple antagonists? What if the conflict is internal? What if the system is the enemy, not a person? And sure, all of that can work, but here's the catch. You still need a primary antagonist. Why? Well, here. Let's strip away all the stuff people think about like genres and tropes and so on. Let's start with this core truth. Stories are about conflict. A story equals a character trying to resolve a problem. And if there's no obstacle, there's no story. So, for a story to exist, something must resist the protagonist's goal. That's the function of an antagonist. Not necessarily a villain, just the source of meaningful resistance. Pretty basic statement, but why I'm making that clear will make sense as we move through the remaining truths. Here, watch what I mean. Truth number 2. Conflict only matters if it's building towards something. Not all conflict is good conflict. It needs focus. What is the protagonist really fighting? Escalation. How does resistance increase over time? And resolution. How do we know the struggle is over? Scattered antagonism, a rival here, a system there, trauma somewhere else, can generate static tension, but it doesn't pay off unless there's one battle that matters more than the rest. That's where the primary antagonist comes in. They turn a series of obstacles into a single war. What happens when it doesn't? You end up with the Eternals. For those who haven't seen it, so a lot of people, its antagonism includes deviants, celestials, Ecodus, or whatever his name was, flipping sides, moral debates about humanity, and internal betrayals. But it all runs in parallel instead of converging. The conflict doesn't build towards one decisive struggle. It just stacks tension that goes nowhere. That's what happens when you have antagonists, but no primary antagonist. It's not the only danger you should worry about though. Which brings us to truth number 3. The audience needs a face to fight. We're wired to make sense of things through people. It's not enough to say, the system is corrupt, or trauma is holding the hero back. If there's no face to the resistance, there's no one to beat, and no emotional release when they're finally overcome. That's why even abstract forces need a representative. The Matrix doesn't just give us the concept of control, it gives us Agent Smith. V for Vendetta doesn't just rage at authoritarianism, it gives us Chancellor Sutler. Batman doesn't just fight crime, he fights the Joker, who embodies chaos. This is psychological. Humans track characters, not concepts. If you want your story's theme to land, it needs a carrier. That's the role of the primary antagonist. For a great example of something that violates this, and what it can feel like when one does, let's turn our attention to The Giver. Now, the story is rich with theme, emotional suppression, control, conformity, and the system itself is clearly the villain. But the problem? There's no one driving it. The elders exist, sure, but none of them really step forward to embody the opposition. No one is hunting Jonas down. No one's actively trying to break him, silence him, stop his escape. He just leaves. And while that might feel haunting or poetic to some readers, it doesn't land with emotional impact. There's no one to beat, no pressure to break through, and that's the issue. When the conflict stays abstract, and it has no face, it's hard for the audience to feel like anything's really been overcome. Truth number 4. The story needs convergence. If your story's conflict isn't built to something specific, your climax will always feel like a letdown. Why? Because a great climax isn't just the most intense moment, it's the most focused. It's when all threads pull tight around a single test, a single opponent, a single truth that has been faced. And here's the simple rule. If everything is the enemy, nothing is. The primary antagonist is what makes your ending mean something. They are the final obstacle, the sharpest contrast, the face of everything that had to be overcome. After 8 seasons of building tension, you'd think we get one hell of a final confrontation in Game of Thrones. But what did we actually get? The Night King gets taken out mid-season. Cersei dies in a cave-in. Dany snaps and gets stabbed 5 minutes later. The story had too many threads, but no clear convergence point. Who was the final enemy? What was the final test? There wasn't one. So instead of one powerful, earned climax, we got a scattered mess. That's what happens when you don't anchor your story around a primary antagonist. I repeat, if everything's the enemy, nothing is. And for my final truth, there's something so many don't take into consideration that we must. Truth number 5, time and attention are finite. Look, even if your story's layered, even if you've got a corrupt system, personal rivals, psychological demons, situational pressure, you've only got so much space to make it all land. You don't get infinite pages. You don't get infinite audience patience. So if the reader can't tell who or what matters most, if the conflict feels like it's pointing in 12 directions, then when the dust settles, they won't even know what winning looks like. That's the danger. Without a central antagonist, the emotional impact gets diluted. From a narrative economy standpoint, the primary antagonist is the center of gravity. Everything else, the subplots, the systems, the internal struggles, should orbit them. They're what holds the tension together. Because scattered threats might be realistic, but stories aren't built to simulate life. They're built to reveal truth, and truth needs focus. That's pretty much the core of it all. If it's still not clicking with you or you want to challenge me on this, let me know in the comments. I'll help you work through it. Anyway, for those who do get it, let's move on to the next question. How the heck do you actually figure out who the primary antagonist is? Assuming you have multiple ones, of course. Lucky for you, I have 5 steps and I have a checklist that I'm willing to share with you. All I ask in return is that you like the video, and if you find this helpful or use it at all, comment on the video, since it's little things like that which help this channel grow. Oh, and if you want to go the extra mile in helping me provide valuable content you won't hear anywhere else on YouTube, consider becoming a channel member like these folks. I don't ask for much, and it all adds up to make a difference for me. Now, for those who still need some convincing, allow me to show you my method. Step 1. What's the core conflict? Before anything else, you need to be clear on what the actual struggle is. Luckily, there's only 8 potential ones, as I documented in my video which starts the outlining process, among others. I'll show the list here. Check out that video or my website for more. Regardless, know that this is your battlefield, and your primary antagonist is the one dominating that field. Step 2. Who applies the most direct pressure? You don't need your primary antagonist in every scene, but they should be the one whose presence or influences keeps making life harder. Who creates the biggest setbacks? Who escalates the tension instead of just showing up for a one-off conflict? Who forces the protagonist to make the hardest calls? If someone's just showing up to be spicy then vanishing, they're not the center of gravity. Step 3. Who challenges the hero's arc? This is where we stop thinking tactically and start thinking thematically. Who tempts the protagonist to fall back into old patterns? Who represents a belief system or flaw they are trying to overcome? Who actually resists the transformation they need to go through? Step 4. Who controls the stakes? Now zoom out and look at the story's pressure cooker. Who can hit the protagonist where it hurts most? Who holds leverage over what matters most? Lives, reputation, relationships, safety. Who has the most power to make the protagonist's failure feel like a loss? Remember, tension isn't just about opposition. It's about what happens if they lose. Step 5. Who ties it all together? If your story has multiple antagonists, one of them usually connects the others, directly or indirectly. Who's the puppet master? Or at least the biggest disruptor? Who's thematically central to everything else happening? Who feels like the final boss, even if they're not the most visible one? You're looking for the spider at the center of the web. Once you've narrowed it down to a few possibilities, run them through this. Do they directly oppose the protagonist's main goal or desire? cause the most meaningful setback, challenge protagonists to interchange, control or influence the stakes the most, represent the central theme of the conflict, impact or influence the other antagonist, feel like the climax should involve them. If you're getting 5 or more yes answers, there's your primary antagonist. Having a primary antagonist doesn't limit your story's complexity. It gives it focus. Once you know where the pressure's coming from, everything else, your plot, your scenes, your emotional arcs, get sharper. Because again, if everything's the enemy, nothing is. But when one force rises above the rest, now you got tension with teeth. Now, for those who have antagonists down or a primary antagonist but don't know how to actually plot everything, I've got some great news for you. My next video will share my method for plotting stories. If it's already up while you're watching this one, give it a watch. If it isn't and you're interested, I recommend rewinding to the start of my story mark scaffolding method. It's going to be pivotal to what comes next.